Hey, hey, Paul.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Good. I'm great. I'm great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, so there's a few things before we get started. So first of all, as I was telling you, I spring things on you. So that's what I do. That's what we do to each other. But that's it. We're launching a kind of secret sales and marketing community. It's going to be in a text SMS platform.
Okay.
So basically, just texting like you would text your mom or your best friend or whatever, and basically, whoever signs up, like I said, it's free other than all the text messaging fees that you would normally get. And from that, we'll be able to answer like specific questions. So if somebody has a question like, "Hey, Paul, I'm having a hard time recruiting. Do you have a few tips?" Well, you can send off a quick video, or if I know the answer, I can text it back for you or stuff like that. So I think it's gonna be really fun. And I already have like some really crazy ideas. I'm thinking we could do some exclusive like content and interviews that would be shared maybe on the podcast, but only at a later date and stuff like that. So I think it'll be really fun. At some point in the show, you'll see a kind of caption underneath with all the details.
Cool. I'm
Is
in.
that fun?
Okay.
We'll see what it gives. I think there'll be some fun stuff there. But on to today's subject. Topic. So last week you were really nice enough to go through like kind of like coach me or teach me, and I know it was kind of a very high level compared to what you do with your clients, but I'm not paying you, so that's fine. On how to build a sales process, and so what I took some of that information and I went to my HubSpot account and I kind of created that sales process. So I was thinking would be interesting is maybe share some of my thoughts that I was going through it. Let me know if it's stuff that you've heard from other people. And two, kind of like, like comment, critique, praise. Praise is always really fun. So what do you think about that?
I think it's a great idea. Let's see it.
Cool. So honestly, it was a little difficult for a few reasons. What's that?
I don't promise praise.
Oh man. Okay, well at least praise me for doing this live in front of everybody.
That's true. I praise you for doing it live in front of everybody.
So honestly, it was a little challenging. One, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and it's not easy to build a sales process because once I kind of understood like the meaning of it, the true meaning of what a sales process should be doing, which is kind of each stage is kind of a go, no go, and it should really be help you understand who's actually going to sign on and who isn't. I found that was a little more difficult. Two, I find like I have a lot of, like we talked a lot last week or last time about like kind of how I find those leads. And I find like I get a lot of, I get inbound leads right now. So I'm not prospecting as much anymore. So that kind of made it a bit harder because obviously I tackle them a bit differently. I need to kind of qualify them a bit more than I would like on LinkedIn. I kind of already have a good feeling whether it'd be a good fit or not. So that was a kind of a challenge right there. And two, like obviously I don't have a big pipeline, right? Like it's a lot of, I'm on my own, so I just need a handful of clients at a time. Like I don't have like hundreds of people in there. So it kind of always felt a little theoretical. Those were kind of like some of the challenges that I had. Is that something that you hear often? I mean, obviously you do a lot more hand holding for your clients.
Well, typically I don't do it with a person who does it solo, right? Typically I do it with a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea to do it for the group of people is to make sure that they're doing things, one, in a similar way, and doing things logically that'll build the business in a similar way so that everyone has the same semantics. So part of the reason you're doing is trying to organize. And I think it's great to have, I obviously think it's great to have a sales process even when you're alone.
Yeah.
The idea of having the same semantics or the same language and the same process as everyone else doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You're alone. But for yourself, it's good because it'll help you create your funnel. But like for everyone to give the same value to the different stages is important. For people to use the same language, for people to learn from each other. Now, you could do this by, like you and I are both work alone, so we could share our sales processes and see how it goes forward, and we could try to work it together. But the idea for you is really to make sure that you're not forgetting anything as you're going along when you're talking to your client, right? To say, okay, what am I doing at this stage?
Right.
Have I done everything that's necessary to go to the next stage? It's not just to say, oh, it's in there, it's 10%, and it'll be in the next stage, right? So you need to know what are the steps to go from one level to the other.
Yeah.
And actually, in the last week, I've also sort of boiled down my sales process to being even smaller.
Nice.
And I'll tell you a little bit about it, maybe as I'm looking at yours.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right, here we go. So first of all, obviously I work with HubSpot. I have a free sales account, so obviously there's some functionalities that are limited. And two, this is kind of the back end, because in the front end, like what I would see in the day-to-day, there's like some old client information and stuff like that. So I don't want it to,
of course. Yeah, so it won't be, absolutely. I understand that.
All right, so here I'll put it full screen. Can you see it? Here, I'll remove the captions for a bit. All right, so basically I kind of put it in 3 to 4 stages. I mean, I'm not including one and lost as a real stage per se. So basically I would start out with kind of that initial call, like kind of the cold call, or if somebody writes in, like kind of calling them back, and just seeing what's what. So there, I don't know why it's not showing up, but basically I had added a field that I kind of need to complete before moving it on to the next stage, which is just, did we book like kind of a discovery call? And, as I'm talking and we spoke a bit offline right before this, I should probably put some qualifying elements in there. Like, did I ask maybe, 2, 3, I mean, I know it's an initial call, so I don't really usually have that much time on that initial call, but do I have like 2, 3 things that I want to make sure of before it's even deciding whether it's even worth doing a discovery call?
Yeah. Yes. And I call that stage 0, by the way.
Okay.
So you can call it what you want. As you know, there's a bunch of different names out there for different stages. And honestly, I don't really care what you call your stage as long as it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And I call it stage 0 for a very specific reason. Because you're preparing. You actually haven't communicated with the person yet, right?
Right.
You're preparing, so you're doing a LinkedIn research, you're doing a Google search, you're doing an analysis, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. You're reviewing the reasons why you should be calling this person. Now, you work alone, and it's funny because when we were talking about this earlier, you were like, well, I do that already. And it's almost instinctive for you, right? Because you do a search, you write stuff, and it comes back. So that's where when you're alone, you probably have a process to decide whether these are people I should call or not. So you didn't even think of making it a stage.
Yeah.
But it is a stage. It's your pre-qualifying stage. It's like, who am I going to call? You're not just calling any random person on
right.
So you might not put it in here because you're alone, but let's say you were a group, or let's say you hire some people in a few years. You might tell them, or in a few months, or in a few weeks, you might tell them, hey, these are the preparation stages.
Yeah.
So maybe tell me really quickly about your prep or pre-qualifying stages.
Yeah, so usually like we talked a bit about last time, I'll look whether they, what's the size of their marketing team. I'll look at a bit of a revenue. Like I said, I don't always look at it because I find like the data is not always super clean. So it's a little hard on a prospecting level to validate that. My main one is like, are they using HubSpot, and like, what's the size of their team, and kind of, are they kind of happy with the way things are going? Okay.
All right. So that to me is your stage 0 or your prep stage, whatever you want to call it.
Prep stage, right.
And then your initial call is when you're actually calling the person. And how do you know you've completed, how have you completed that stage? What does it mean for that stage to be completed? What happens in that initial call stage?
Yeah. So my goal, so for the one that I have right there, the goal is really to, how should I say? The goal is really to, how should I say that? It's to just book that discovery call.
Okay. All right. So so it's like a cold call. You're calling them, you're reaching out to them, and then you want to interest them. You're doing, I guess what we call a conversation starter.
Yeah.
You're saying, hi, I'm Fab from Fab Enterprises. I'm amazing. I'm good looking. I help people like you who are insecure about the best marketing online strategies or the best marketing sales strategies or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if there's interest and they start talking to you, are they automatically in discovery call? They jumped over?
Yeah. So that's it. Once I've booked the call, book the discovery call, I should say. Then I send them over to discovery call, let's say 1, because last time we spoke, like you were talking about like kind of 2 discovery stages, and but you kind of ultimately said like if we could do it all in one stage, great. If not, divide it up into 2. So I kind of divided it up into 2 just so that maybe visually it feels like a little bit more dynamic, but so once the initial call, once the discovery call is booked in that initial call, I move them over to the discovery call 1.
Okay. Now the most important part of all this, well, there's 2 most important parts, 2 very important parts, is obviously the update stage properties, right? So you're talking about interest, want help. You're talking the decision maker. Are you finding out their motivation? A real reason to buy, motivation to buy. What's the problem costing them? Are they, and I'd even add another one, are they committed to fixing it, right?
Yeah.
You also want to know the timeline and the urgency.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to quantify the problem or the opportunity too.
Yeah.
What is the lack of opportunity? Quantify how much would you evaluate the value of what it is that you're not doing? So you got to add those in. That's all in your discovery call 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Now, to me, that's the most important part of all this. Now, I'm going to challenge you on the win probability, but we'll talk about that afterwards.
Oh yeah, I honestly didn't really, I didn't know what to put there. That's where, like I was telling you at the beginning, it feels a little theoretical and a bit up in the air because, I don't, first of all, it's brand new. 2, I don't have that enough of a track record to really know where things are at this point. But the calculating how much this, whatever you call it, calculating how much the problem is worth to them. I think, not worth to them, but how much it's costing them or whatever. I find that's a challenge, right? Because I think in marketing, there's the quantifiable part, which is lead generation, and I need to generate X number of leads and stuff like that. But then there's the other of like, because there's the branding part and all that. So I find like that's a little harder to quantify. And second, a lot of the mandates that I'm doing, especially right now, these days, is kind of just, setting up HubSpot, helping them clean up HubSpot, put it in HubSpot. And so a lot of that is kind of, let's call it operational. Again, is a little more difficult to quantify. I mean, in some cases, it's a bit more obvious. So one person I was talking to is like, well, wouldn't you be rather selling or marketing than actually doing a lot of the back end stuff? So there's quantifying on that level, but beyond that, it becomes a bit more.
Okay, so let's boil that down a second. I understand that in your world, it's not necessarily quantifiable in the sense that you can attach a dollar sign to it, right?
Yeah.
An opportunity or a missed opportunity. But there's still quantification that needs to be done. So even if they're doing a branding campaign, how you quantify that is Mr. and Mrs. Client, what happens, what are you hoping that the branding campaign will bring to your company, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're hoping that the branding campaign will bring them notoriety or top of mind in a certain field, like, I don't know, whatever it might be, whatever service, or they're hoping just to, just put their name out there so that when people think of a certain thing, they think of them first. That's quantifiable.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
See, so it might not always be dollars. So you still have to see, how do they quantify it? Why are they doing this? Yes, I want to do it because I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that, but how are you going to gauge whether it's successful or not? Right. So that's how. So, well, we don't know. Well, if people talk about us if I go down into the subway and I ask someone for an ice cream sandwich and they say the Fabio, well, then I know we've done our job. Okay, well, that's quantification. right? There's some point of
That sounds like an amazing marketing strategy, marketing campaign.
I made it as ridiculous as possible. So, and what's their timeline? That's so important. Like, you got to put that in there. So what's the timeline for the things that, you want to do?
Yeah, I had it somewhere. I don't remember exactly where I put it.
Well, either in your discovery call or discovery call, you need to know the timeline or the urgency. How is this to this people?
I have urgency in discovery call too.
Okay, I just don't see it. And the other thing you need to have is, are they committed to fixing this?
Yeah. Or
making it happen, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a nice to have. We'd like to have a branding campaign. It would be really fun, Fab. It's cool. What does it mean to you? Well, if people would say they would talk about the Fabio sandwich when we went into the Subway. How important is that to you? Well, we have a lot of other priorities. Okay, so it's not a priority, right?
Yeah.
So that you need to know. Now, the most important part here, Fab, is once I've had the initial call, and you're right, you put it 10, it could be 15, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're into the discovery call and discovery call 2. I would actually just make that all one big freaking thing.
Yeah, and just leave it in there if it doesn't move forward.
You can split it up, but I really don't. I less and less believe that those 2 stages need to be split up. I think that stage should be called, it's all about the client.
Yeah, the client stage.
Your initial call, your discovery call, and discovery call 2 should be, it's all about the client. Now, I understand why you break out the initial call, right? Because that's sort of like the jump. That's sort of like, I'm jumping off the building, I'm putting my parachute on, right?
Yeah.
So it's that initial step forward, the initial action that you've done to either book a meeting. But once that conversation starts, it's very possible that you'll do all that in one long conversation, or you'll do it over 10 conversations over a year.
Yeah.
Basically, all those things in there you need to find out, timeline, urgency, quantification. What else did we say? I'm drawing a blank here. I've gotten written down. Hold on. So,
are they committed? Are they?
Their motivation to buy, it's huge.
Yeah.
What are they willing to? Are they willing to invest? What are they willing to invest? That's obviously tied into the quantification, right?
Yeah.
If it's not quantified, if you're saying, oh, it's going to cost $1 bazillion for people to say, to mention the Fabio sandwich in the Subway, well, like, are you willing to invest $1 bazillion to do that? Is that worth it? So it's all about the client. Basically, when you've done those 2 stages, you're now, and I don't like your review proposal part. I would call that value proposition, because where that's really where you're bringing forward your value proposition. You're going to tie in what's important to them to what you're going to do for them, right?
Yeah.
You're the solution. You're part of you're maybe not the whole path, but you're part of the path to where they're trying to go.
Yeah.
That's your stage. Well, what you call your stage 4 here, I'd call it your stage 5, because you should also have your stage 0.
Right.
Unless you put 2 or 3 together, then it's your stage 4.
Yeah, gotcha.
And if it's
value proposition, I got it. And so in the value proposition, I mean, I had put it as a property here, but what you're saying is, like, this should be a stage. So in that stage, I'm just kind of talking about,
that's where you're selling your value. You're tying your value to what you're going to do for them. So it's sort of
kind of basically saying, this is what you want to do. This is what I bring to the table. Let's do it together. Type of thing.
My old Xerox training days, we used to call it selling the need. Was it selling the need, or selling the I forget the name for it. But we would just basically, you're tying their needs and wants to what you're going to do for them.
Gotcha.
It's part of, you're also closing there, right? But that's closing. When you're if you've done your job really well, a B2B sale, you're never closing. You never have to pressure anyone. And if you're really amazing and you've asked every single question, you won't even encounter that many objections. I'll give you an example. I heard a really good one this week on a podcast. It was Will Brown. He said, we've talked about this objection. Sorry, a little parentheses. We've talked about this objection before. When someone says, "Oh, I really want to think about it," right? And you're like, "Well, what do you want to think about?" Of course, what do you want to think about? If at the beginning of that conversation you say to the person, let's say you've had your first, and let's say you have had first, second, third, and fourth discovery call, and you tell your client, So, Mr. Klein, just to set things straight, if today in our value proposition we're capable of fixing or creating the opportunity that you're looking for, is there any reason within the price range you're looking that we've already mentioned that you're willing to invest? Is there any reason that we wouldn't do business together?
Mm-hmm.
You're already smashing the the potential objection before it starts. So of course you won't always do that, or the situation won't be such that you can do that, and you will get objections. But if you're dealing with the objections as they come along, that's where you're closing.
Yeah.
You deal with the objections and you put them aside. Your objection is finding out what it is that's holding back your client. That's where the closing happens. But people who call me up and say, "Hey, teach me how to close," that's the last thing I do. I don't teach people how to close.
Yeah.
There's people sometimes in a one-call close, they'll say, they called you up and, "So, Mr. Calando, would you like product A, which is going to be $10 a month, or product B, which will be $15 a month?" And then you say, "Well, none." That's a close, right? I'm trying to close you. And so in your value proposition stage, if you're really tying in what's important to the client, and they've told you they want to invest, and they're committed to invest it, and they quantified, everything about it, you're not closing. The people who close usually have skipped one of those stages. They,
right.
They never really got the commitment to invest. Or the client said, and you just keep going. You just keep on, asking your questions, or your verbal diarrhea on your product. Like, is this something that interests you? Well, I don't know. Well, this cup is so amazing. It carries all the juice in the world. So you want it? I'll give you for $5. I don't need a cup, I don't drink juice. I drink straight out of my water bottle. Or here's a cup to put all your liquids in. You told me that so far you've been holding all your liquids in your hand. Yeah, you're right. So how important is it? Well, it's kind of hard for me to walk around the house like this and turn on the TV when I have my hands cupped all the time. Well, imagine how amazing a cup would be. Are you willing to invest $2 in this cup? Yeah, I would. So you're actually filling a need or filling a want, or whatever it is, and how important is it to them? If you're 75 on the priority list, or 122, well, then why are you in there? So in your stage 4, bring up your thing again. So there, when you're doing your value proposition, that's where the closing happens.
Gotcha.
That's where you're doing that stuff, right?
Right.
But like I said before, if you have to close, is not a good thing, But
and that's why the last 2 stages are more kind of the fait accompli, like you've won it, you've lost it. Like there's nothing happening in one of those 2 last stages. It's just a list of those that are done and the list of those that are no-go, basically.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about it. It's okay to have discovery call 1 and 2 in there, but it might be, the discovery stage might be 5 calls, 3 meetings, who knows, whatever it might be. And, depending on the decision maker, because in discovery call 1, you might be talking to decision maker, and then you're asking, so, if we, once we agree, or if you agreed on everything that needs to be done, what would be the process to go forward, right? Well, I need to talk to my boss, blah, 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 blah. Well, then you're finding out the decision-making process. Well, can we get him in on the conversation? No, I'm the one who has to pass everything on. Well, then you need to make sure he's a flag holder. So there's all these sub things. But I think you understand that. We've talked about this a million times. But, what I would really like to see, and I'm not sure you can do this in your process, in your sales process, is to put percentages on all of those different things, like timeline, urgency, quantification.
Okay, so on each of the elements, not just necessarily the stages, right?
Not the whole stage, or you put a tick box, and once your stage is completely done, then you go ahead. Because I think your discovery call 1 and 2, depending on what you put in there, those 2 together, once you're done, you're more like at 60% or 70%, right?
Yeah. So I know
all those elements
on a paid account, I'd be able to put it so that like if something's not completed, like one of those properties isn't completed, like I can't move it forward. I can't do that on my level of account. But in terms of the stages, like the probability, those I think usually are kind of stage based.
Okay. All right. And then your review proposal. Your value proposition. Once you once you've finished that, you should be at 95%.
Yeah.
Right? If you've done everything and then you know what the next step is. And if you haven't finished it, you haven't done it all, then you're still in that stage. But once that stage is completed,
yeah,
you should almost even be at 100%. It should be,
right.
You know, and then you can flip it to won or lost. So
yeah.
Because
I see that makes sense.
Yeah, and your at the end of your value proposition, you know, you're closing, so you're at 100%, and then you're flipping it to won or lost.
Yeah.
Well, if it's lost because something happened, then they've come up with our bank account was hacked and we lost all our money and we can't do business with you. Okay, well then you put in lost.
Yeah. Obviously, there's always these like COVIDs that happen out of the blue. No, I don't know where. There's always something that happens, but yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, cool. I think I got it. I mean, from what I'm understanding is like add in kind of that deal stage 0 or whatever makes sense for me or whatever. So it's just about the people. Like, who do I have the right information for to be able to kind of reach out to? And you're right. And that stage makes a lot more sense in a way when I'm talking about inbound leads. Because when I talk about outbound, I mean, I've prospected them. I kind of know, at a 90% confidence rate that they're a good fit. But if they're an inbound lead, I don't know. Right. And so that stage 0 makes sense. Actually, it does.
Makes sense for you. Yeah,
it makes sense for me, and it kind of clarifies some of the challenges I had when I was building that first stage, is because it's like, it's like that's it. I don't always know, but yeah, so that stage 0 makes sense. So then initial call. I mean, the goal of the initial call is really to book that meeting, but maybe a bit more like, are you the right person to talk to? Maybe like some basic need evaluation as well, right? Like before I'm going to spend their time or even my time, I need to make sure that there's something valuable there. There's some basic need that's unmet. After that, is it valid or not? Like, that's what the discovery call is for. Then have 1 or 2 discovery calls. And that's where I need to answer kind of your 10 or so kind of things, like the urgency, the timeline, have they bought in? What's their main motivation or motivation to buy? I don't know how you call it. I never remember how you call it.
Motivation to buy.
Was that?
Their motivation to buy.
Exactly. So then,
it's not their motivation to buy, it's the overall motivation, because we say motivation to buy, but really what it is that what's their motivation in their business, right? So they buy from you, but you need to understand what the motivation in the business is. So I call it motivation to buy, but really it should be called motivation.
Motivation.
What is driving them? What's their basic drive to do all this stuff? Now,
right, and like I'm almost drawing a parallel to that episode we did on recruitment, right? And you talked a lot about motivation of a salesperson or a sales leader. I mean, it's the same thing for a client, right? If they're not motivated at the end of the day, then it's just not going to go far, right? And I was even showing an example before we went online of a client that I felt wasn't motivated to start with. They kind of like, they weren't sure where they wanted to go. And, it just didn't end up going that well as a client, right? They were just not motivated. They went forward, but then it was kind of wishy-washy and stuff like that. So that motivation is key. If they're not motivated, it's rarely going to go well at the end of the day.
Yeah. And really, if you, well, we already have it up there, but your first stage, the other thing I want to do is what you want to do is I would call your stage with the last thing that you need to achieve. So in your initial call, what are you trying to do?
Right. So it would be like kind of book discovery call or whatever. And then stage discovery call 1 would be like, like decision maker or something like the key milestone or the key like step to take or whatever. Yeah.
So here I would say, for discovery call 1 and 2, we got to think about, what is it like? We understand their motivation and what's gonna drive, how interested they are to want to buy. So committed to the solution, right? That's right. Really, that's what committed to the solution or the opportunity. And then your proposal, the last thing there is it's closed. Bang.
Yeah.
So think of that, because then that's your goal.
So the main one, like the header almost, is like that's your main goal. Like, so stage one, like there's stage 0 would be,
Yeah.
are they, qualified? Like,
Pre-qualified.
What's that?
Are they pre-qualified?
Yeah, they pre-qualified. On paper, does it make sense? And then the other one would be book discovery call, and then it would be, that's it, like, motivated to buy, and so on and so forth, or motivated.
Yep, exactly.
Excellent.
All
right, Paul, this has been phenomenal. A little uncomfortable, but very phenomenal.
Did I give you enough praise?
What's that?
Did I give you enough praise?
I don't know, but I like learning, so I'll take the living as a praise. No, it's really good, and I mean, it's important. Like, I think, again, I mean, I'm obviously a marketer. I've worked with salespeople almost my whole career. Anyway, the whole part that I was in B2B, and like it's as I'm working with you, that I'm working even through this example. It's kind of impressive to realize like how undervalued maybe the sales process is in a lot of organizations, how it's misunderstood, how it's just like just do something, just put something up there, you know what I mean? And I get that a lot of sales leaders are necessarily technical people, and so maybe there's a sort of maybe they're a bit intimidated by like their Salesforce or their HubSpot or their Pipedrive or whatever, and but it's so important.
Well, it's funny because the sales process is probably the thing that people understand the least, and that once you really have it down pat, it's sort of your Bible to success.
Yeah.
And once you have your sales process, it'll also help you in defining where things fell apart with your clients and see what you could work on, right?
Yeah.
If you're not able to, a lot of people, work on their elevator pitch, but if you get the elevator pitch, but then you stop asking the right questions and you don't find out all these other things, and if you have a sales process, I never got his commitment,
Yeah.
I never got the fact that if he's willing to invest, or he never quantified it, or, because we often jump to all these, we say, oh, well, we're offering him a good solution, he's going to want it, right?
Yeah.
But, or she's going to want it, but you know all that. Cool.
Yeah, and it's like, it's funny, maybe it's a weird parallel to draw, but somebody was asking me like why I liked HubSpot, and what I like is for like those kind of early stage mid-market companies, it kind of gives you a framework to build your marketing around. And I find like that's what your sales process is, right? It's kind of your sales framework for your organization. Like you were saying, like you could have a great elevator pitch, but if everything falls apart after, or you could be great at asking questions, but you're really not good at like getting those people into the pipeline because you don't know what questions to ask early on or whatnot. I think it gives you kind of that framework, the what to follow for sales to work.
What a lot of people are really good at is selling, is the value proposition bit. It's the initial call. What a lot of people are not good at is really finding out what's important to their client.
Right.
And we often miss some stages because all we're thinking of is our product, or our service. And we're forgetting that for the client, these things are not, your product and your service don't matter. They don't care about your product or service. They care only what your product and service is going to bring to them, right? Unless it's your dad or your mom buying from you, but or your sister. But and really, I mean, I spend most of my time explaining to salespeople and sales organizations that their clients don't give a crap about what they're selling. They really only care about what it's going to do for them. And we forget it all the time. We always come back on, this is a great car. It does this, it does that. It's fancy, blah, blah, blah. And it gets sold as this fancy golden trinket. But then if you're not connecting it to what your client needs, and I've said that you and I have said this a million times, well, then you're not going there, and you're not going to sell it. You're not going to manage to make that client see the value in what you're offering them. So you always have to put yourself in your client's shoes and understand, if I had this business, why am I doing this business?
Yeah.
Why am I running this pizzeria?
Yeah. And I think I don't know if it was last time or anyway, conversation we had a little in the last month or so was, I think a lot of salespeople, and I mean, I've recognized myself in there just personally, is like, you know, you're kind of almost afraid of the answer. And that's why you don't ask the answer. You're like, if I show them how phenomenal my product is or my service or whatever, you know, I have more of a chance of convincing them, even if I know that there's a good chance they'll say no. And I think, you know, and there's a lot of ways to go against that, like a full pipeline being like the best way. But I think that's definitely a big key in there, is like, oh, I kind of intrinsically know that it's probably not a great fit for us, but man, I really need this sale to happen because I need to pay my mortgage next month. And so I'm going to try to shove it down there and say whatever I need to make it happen. And, you know, obviously, like, usually that doesn't end well.
Sales, yeah. And you know what? I as a junior salesperson, I did that, and you know, as a senior salesperson, you know, and as a seasoned salesperson, you find out that it's never about you.
Yeah.
And you know, if it is, then it's either a shyster sale or a lucky sale, right? Because it's not usually about the product, you know, unless you're selling an iPhone in 2009, but you know, or you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times where like this product is just, you know,
I want to say I have it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like you're only on the one on the market. You're the best one. You're well known. Your branding works really well, and so people just want to work with you. You know, but I was just listening to another podcast not long ago, and there was a head of marketing of
another podcast.
I know, right? It happens. It was actually the head of marketing of a sales software. And he was saying, even though we have a great fit and our products and our clients love it, like nothing sells itself, right? Like there's still a sales component to go in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
all right, maybe a bit off track at this point.
Yeah, right. Let's stop the live feed.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Ciao, everyone.